Harvey Comics. When I was growing up, I wrote them off as kids' stuff, and I was still a kid. It seemed that even from my earliest days, I couldn't be bothered with the gentle adventures of Casper the Friendly Ghost or the cash-infused shenanigans of Richie Rich. I simply wanted no part of the Harveyverse. But the story might have been different if I'd been around just a few years before, when Harvey tried its hand at superheroes.
Breakfast!
Good morning and welcome to Comics for Breakfast. I'm your host, Jason Mink. The Bat-Mania of 1966 comes up on breakfast a lot, and for good reason. Comic books have always been a reactive medium reflecting the trends of the world around them. War, Western, and horror all had their day thanks to the popularity of those subjects in their time, and superheroes are no exception. However, unlike those other examples, superheroes had already been massively popular once before, over the course of the Second World War. After the war, the public's interest in superheroes waned, and the 1950s saw comics publishers turn their attention to romance, funny animals, or whatever else might catch a reader's eye. More than a decade later, and the unexpected success of the ABC television show Batman made superheroes a hot commodity once again, and other publishers were quick to cash in. Marvel was already a strong second in popularity, but that didn't stop other companies like Archie, Tower, and MLJ from throwing their capes into the ring as well. If you showed up at the newsstand or spinner rack in the summer of '66, you would have been confronted by an explosion of new titles, all featuring brightly clad heroes, odd-looking villains, and more corn than you could shake your cob at. Not content to sit this one out, Harvey Comics hitched up its britches and came up with its own line of campy heroes. Harvey approached no less than the legendary Joe Simon to oversee this new project. Known as Harvey Thrillers to differentiate between these books and the company's more age-friendly fare, the line saw work from legendary creators including Jack Kirby, Bob Powell, Wally Wood, Otto Binder, as well as talented up-and-comers like Jim Steranko. In spite of this abundance of talent, the books didn't sell, and the line folded by the spring of '67. And while not commercially viable, we did get some interesting comics out of the deal. Now, I've already talked about Harvey's most infamous hero, Jigsaw, in the very first Comics for Breakfast. The character is notorious for his ridiculously disturbing power set, and to be honest with you, just thinking about it makes me slightly ill. Today we're going to look at three less notorious, but nonetheless compelling characters from the short-lived Harvey Thriller line, beginning with the sensational SPYMAN. And this one was clearly a no-brainer. James Bond was at the height of his popularity, the secret agent's run of successful novels and films resulting in an espionage boom in modern entertainment. Nick Fury was already doing the super spy thing over in Marvel's anthology Strange Tales, but Harvey had their own angle. Instead of being short an eye, their hero would be missing a hand. Only it's okay, as his crummy old appendage is replaced by a state-of-the-art prosthesis that's not only as good, it's better. How so? Well, take the Steranko Penn diagram. There's an X-ray, a blaster, a super magnet, and it makes mounds and mounds of coleslaw. Anyway, our aforementioned SPYMAN is Johnny Chance, Agent of Liberty. After losing his hand in the line of duty, Chancey is outfitted with what amounts to a Swiss Army knife on the end of his wrist. Each finger has a special function, able to be removed and swapped out with additional fingers that he carries on his belt. Let that sink in for a minute. Our tale begins with a dying spy relaying with his last breath critical information. "Kill the id," the man repeats over and over again, confounding the doctor on sight. In medical terms, the id is the personality component made up of unconscious psychic energy that works to satisfy basic urges, needs, and desires. The agent expires, and SPYMAN is called back to the secret base under the Statue of Liberty to crack the case. Here's our hero now, apparently lurking in a park. A good spy always practices their craft. He contacts home base using his radio finger, which is fine. I get it. If you're captured, the first thing an enemy is going to take is your communication device. The second thing that they'd probably take is your super obvious tricked out fist, but hey, let's not get hung up here. Just then a beautiful young woman appears, chased by ray gun-toting thugs. SPYMAN gives her a hand while at the same time giving the thugs the finger. The magnetic finger. Unfortunately for our hero, the villains hit him with an immobilizing ray and cart him back to their secret headquarters. Meanwhile, the escaped blonde from the beginning feels pretty bad about what happened to Spy Guy. Turns out Tiana here is a member of the little cabal that abducted him, and only by returning to the dreadful place she just escaped, she might aid the man who saved her. At the aforementioned dreadful place, SPYMAN is given an example of its deadly safeguards, then brought to meet id itself, which is, of course, a big purple robot. What were you expecting? SPYMAN blasts his captor with a black light ray, which probably makes him look pretty groovy in a dark room, but not much else. SPYMAN then runs through his options, first giving the gang a taste of flame before, and I quote, fingering them again with a special grenade digit. Just then Tanya shows up, ostensibly to lead SPYMAN to freedom, but in actuality distracting him just long enough so that he can be shot in the back and killed. Yep, dead as a doornail by page 13. Your hero, ladies and gentlemen. The id ruminates a bit, then heads off to its think plan chamber, leaving Tanya with the dead SPYMAN. But Tanya, is smarter than the big purple robot and all its miniskirt thugs put together, and she sneaks off to a secret chamber to revive our hero. SPYMAN comes back from his permanent vacation, but all is not well. The id has reached into his mind, manipulating our hero into seeing robots everywhere. Tania gets him to a lead-lined tunnel where the robot's brainwaves can penetrate, and then regales us all with the id's astonishing origin story, featuring a scientist who creates an artificial intelligence which builds a series of larger and deadlier bodies to inhabit until attacking its creator and escaping into the world. Sound familiar? Well, it should. But interestingly, this tale prefigures the first appearance of Marvel Comics Ultron by 2 entire years. Holy litigation, Batman! SPYMAN and Tania make a break for it, but all does not go well. Tania catches a stray Destructo beam and melts into slag. Turns out she was a robot too. SPYMAN takes this a bit personally and confronts the id, who pulls that fool hand right off his wrist. Only surprise, this was an emergency bomb hand which blows the menace to pieces. The day is saved, but at what cost? SPYMAN was one of 3 concepts Steranko provided to Harvey, and it's a downright silly one at that. Our hero's entire MO revolves around one gimmick. As a hand, it's pretty impractical, if not downright dangerous. I mean, his middle finger can blow a door off its hinges. Think about all the things you use your hand for on a daily basis, and you begin to see my point. Why not just replace his missing hand with a regular, non-radioactive one, and then make him a vest with all the same stuff built in. I mean, a vest makes just as much sense, and you're less likely to irradiate your taint in the process. Ooh, or a hat. Spies wear hats. That would be cool. SPYMAN and his amazing trilby. Next up, it's Thrill-O-Rama featuring the PIRANA. Now you might be tempted to think that this handsome blonde bears more than a passing resemblance to a certain king of Atlantis, but you're missing the coral for the seas here. The two couldn't be more different. One is royalty and the other is essentially a beach bum. A strange submarine breaks the water's surface, 4 troops stepping out onto its deck. The recently rescued Generalissimo Brainstorm appears to assess his troops, using his remarkable telepathic powers to beam new orders into their minds. The scheme now set in motion, the weird sub launches itself from the sea and through the wall of the Oceanographic Institute. Just then, an alarm sounds in the nearby houseboat headquarters of Eddie Yates. Who? Well, the PIRANA, that's who. PIRANA gets into harness and rockets himself high above the waves. Crashing into the Institute, our hero engages his foes, but is almost immediately subdued by gas. We are then treated to a truly nonsensical origin that hurts to even try and explain. Basically, a scientist creates a new type of silicone rubber that's permeable to oxygen but not liquid. Here, allow him to explain by placing this rabbit in a bag underwater. It works, but in the name of science, more tests must be done. So the scientist recruits diver Yates to descend to 50 fathoms and then breathe through the rubber. It works, but Yates gets a shock from a nearby cable, which bonds the rubber to his face. Now he can only breathe through the rubber underwater and will suffocate on land. To compensate, he makes himself a funky suit complete with water-filled goggles so he can leave the sea to fight crime. Well, why not? I guess you gotta stay busy, right? Reviving from his backstory coma, PIRANA returns to his base to use his radar to track the sub, which has escaped from the Institute with Spanish treasure. He gets a ping and heads out, taking his pets Bera and Kuda with him. We catch up on the sub, where the general is enjoying a celebratory bowl of soup. The Barracuda causes a distraction while PIRANA sneaks aboard the sub. He starts a scrapping, but once again is immediately taken down, this time by the general closing a door on him. The general offers PIRANA a chance to join his criminal army, but our hero tells him to get stuffed. Using a claw hammer, the general then busts PIRANA's faceplate, sending a spray of broken glass and blood everywhere. It's a shockingly brutal murder for a comic that, thus far, has seemed very reticent to show any real violence. The general dumps PIRANA's body out of an airlock and heads back to his soup. Luckily, Bera and Kuda are there to poke and prod their dead master in the lungs until he starts breathing again. It's just so odd and off-putting. PIRANA goes after the general again, and this time the general just runs him over with the sub, crippling our hero's jet flippers in the process. This leaves the PIRANA unable to swim somehow, and he's helpless, at least until he throws his trident into a nest of electric eels. The eels swarm the sub, their current interfering with the general's brainwaves and causing the sub to sink with all on board presumably left to die. Very heroic. Next up, a brief 2-pager featuring Clawfang the Barbarian, written by Wally Wood, with art from Al Williamson. Just judging from these 2 pages, and it's clear this would have made a far more interesting lead, but hey, I guess PIRANA had better management. Clawfang would get its own feature in the pages of Unearthly Spectaculars number 2 from December of 1966. So yeah, it's a weird book. The aforementioned feat of clay angle gets tired pretty quick. I mean, Spider-Man got his ass kicked a lot too, but this was balanced by little victories. PIRANA, in spite of his amazing abilities, seems woefully unprepared for the challenges he faces and takes a real drubbing. Like SPYMAN before him, he's killed in the course of his adventure only to be revived by a secondary character. Well, characters in the forms of his pets Barra and Kuda, who kinda steal the show here. Tower gambled on the camp aspect without bothering to come up with solid ideas or characters. At best, what we've seen so far reads like the sort of winning contest entry in a 1960s letter column with overly derivative and uninspired concepts, with weak designs and little commercial appeal. If it seems like I'm being overly harsh on these, well, maybe I am. But we do have one more to look at. It's The Man in Black. Sadly, no, not Johnny Cash. We'd have to wait for our good friends over at Spire Comics to put that together. But it's a compelling book nonetheless. Now, this is certainly the outlier when it comes to the thrillers line, and with good reason. This book actually reprints Harvey's Man in Black title from 10 years previous. And it shows. Featuring some lovely art from Comics for Breakfast mainstay Bob Powell, the book stands out like a proverbial sore thumb, both visually and tonally, from the others we've seen so far. Our tale concerns a sculptor tasked with completing a statue. However, the artist lacks the confidence to finish the work. Cue the Man in Black. Also known as fate or kismet, the man is an instrument of universal balance, enacting punishments on mortals of questionable morals. He works alongside Weaver, whose duties are more proactive, and Venus, the goddess of love, who's apparently just slumming it. The man is summoned to carry two souls back to Valhalla, of all places. Before he can act, Venus and her boisterous companion Cupid get involved, coming between the courier and his quarry. The two are taken back to the tent of Saladin, a wrathful ruler out to curry favor with King Midas. Saladin recognizes the man in the pairing as Praxedes, a sculptor on the run after Midas found his representation unfavorable. However, Saladin senses an opportunity and will allow the sculptor and his daughter freedom if he will finish the elaborate sculpture of Venus started by another artist. This gets the vain goddess's attention, and Venus is determined to see the statue finished, but vindictively the man in black appears and aggravates a flaw in the marble, making it so a single hammer strike will shatter the stone. Venus decides to get proactive, and with the help of Cupid, then casts herself in plaster in a wacky sitcom-esque turn of events to make the whole thing happen. The man in black catches wind and steps in, switching plaster of Venus out with the actual statue. The moment of truth come at last. The sculptor hesitates to strike, knowing the flaw will cause the statue to shatter if he strikes the finishing blow, but Saladin insists, threatening to execute the artist's daughter. At the same time, a slap-happy Cupid misfires one of his arrows, chipping away the final bit of stone to leave the statue complete. Saladin is pleased, Praxedes and his daughter are saved, and we wrap things up with some otherworldly shenanigans between our players. It's cute, but insubstantial, the only real virtue here being Bob Powell's artwork. Sadly, the rest of the book is just non-Man in Black reprints. Perhaps Harvey was attempting to drip them out one at a time, but this would be the only issue to headline the character. The superhero boom of '66 resulted in a notable influx of content from creators best known for their work from other companies. While the stories themselves might not be great shakes, the books are interesting artifacts for a time that will not come again. That said, I'm confident that the Harvey Thrillers line has gems yet to yield. Check out this extraordinary house ad for Dynamite Joe, the blast crazy Marine. It looks amazing. And don't even get me started on the Tiger Boy from Twilight. You can bet this won't be the last time we talk Harvey Heroes. Thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed this breakfast, please like, share, and subscribe. If it really gave you gills, please consider throwing a few bucks into the Old Guys Who Like Old Comics tip hat. The streets are cold, baby, and the wolf is always outside the door. I'm your host, Jason Mink, and I hope to see you next Sunday at breakfast.